16-year-old Marcus Thompson stood in handcuffs outside the grocery store, watching his 7-year-old brother cry in the back of a police car. He had been caught stealing a loaf of bread, peanut butter, and milk, items worth $12.47 that would determine whether his little brother ate that night. What he didn't know was that his case would land before Judge Frank Caprio, and what happened next would change both their lives forever. It was a cold Thursday afternoon in February 2020 when Marcus Thompson made the decision that would bring him face to face with destiny. The Central Falls Market on Broad Street was busy with after-school shoppers, parents picking up forgotten items for dinner, and workers grabbing snacks for their evening shifts. Marcus had been standing outside for 20 minutes, watching through the large windows, calculating his chances, and fighting with his conscience. At 16, Marcus was tall for his age, but painfully thin, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame, despite his mother's attempts to find proper-fitting hand-me-downs from the local church donations. His younger brother Danny, just 7 years old, waited for him at home, having asked the same question Marcus had been hearing for 3 days. "When are we going to eat?" Their mother, Linda Thompson, had been battling addiction for 2 years. In her lucid moments, she was loving and present, but those moments had become increasingly rare. Social services had investigated twice, but Marcus had managed to convince the caseworkers that everything was fine, terrified that he and Danny would be separated if the truth came out. He had been acting as both brother and parent to Danny, making sure the little boy got to school, helping with homework, and somehow finding ways to put food on their table. The previous week, their food stamps had run out earlier than expected, and Linda had disappeared again, leaving behind only empty promises and an emptier refrigerator. Marcus had been surviving on school lunch and whatever free samples he could find at the grocery store, but Danny was too young to understand why they had to wait until tomorrow for every meal. That Thursday, Danny had collapsed during recess at his elementary school. The nurse called it low blood sugar and recommended he eat something substantial immediately. Marcus picked up his brother from school, carried him home, and stared at their bare cabinets with a growing sense of desperation that finally overcame his moral reservations. Marcus entered Central Falls Market with a clear plan: bread, peanut butter, and milk. Basic nutrition that would last them at least 3 days, if he was careful with portions. He had exactly $3.47 in his pocket from collecting bottles and cans, nowhere near enough for what he needed, but perhaps enough to buy something small to establish legitimate customer behavior. He moved through the store with practiced casualness, having observed security patterns during previous visits when he was actually shopping with food stamps. The items went into his jacket quickly and efficiently. He wasn't a natural thief, but desperation had taught him focus. He purchased a pack of gum with his $3.47, maintaining eye contact with the cashier and making normal conversation about the weather. Marcus almost made it. He was 5 steps from the door when the security guard's hand landed on his shoulder. "Hold up there, son. I need you to come with me." Everything that followed happened in a blur of humiliation and fear. The security office, the inventory of stolen items, the call to police, and worst of all, the call to emergency contacts that revealed Danny was home alone. The responding officer, Detective Maria Rodriguez, had to collect Danny from their apartment, and seeing his little brother's confused, frightened face in the back of the police car was when Marcus truly understood the magnitude of what he had done. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself standing in the Providence Municipal Court, facing Judge Frank Caprio. He had been assigned a public defender, Jennifer Walsh, who had spent 30 minutes with him discussing plea options, but Marcus barely heard her explanations. He was consumed with worry about Danny, who was temporarily staying with their neighbor Mrs. Patterson while social services completed their investigation. Judge Caprio looked up from his papers as Marcus approached the defendant's table. Something about the teenager immediately caught his attention. Perhaps it was the way he stood with both dignity and defeat, or the obvious care he had taken to dress appropriately for court, despite having limited clothing options. The boy's shoes were worn but polished, his shirt was too large but clean and pressed, and his posture suggested someone much older than his 16 years. Marcus Thompson, Judge Caprio said, reading from the file. You're charged with shoplifting merchandise valued at $12.47 from Central Falls Market. How do you plead? Guilty, Your Honor, Marcus replied immediately, his voice clear and steady. Judge Caprio paused. In his decades on the bench, he had learned to recognize the difference between defendants who pled guilty because they were caught and those who pled guilty because they genuinely accepted responsibility. Marcus fell into the latter category, and that distinction always interested him. Mr. Thompson, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've noticed that most people your age who get caught shoplifting have certain things in common. They steal candy, electronics, clothes, things they want but don't need. But according to this report, you stole bread, peanut butter, and milk. That's not typical teenage shoplifting behavior. Marcus looked directly at Judge Caprio, his jaw tightening slightly. No, sir, it's not. So help me understand. Why those items specifically? For a moment, Marcus considered giving a simple answer that would get him through the hearing quickly. But something in Judge Caprio's tone, not accusatory but genuinely curious, made him reconsider. Because that's what my brother needed to eat, Marcus said quietly. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Tell me about your brother. Danny. He's 7. He collapsed at school because... Marcus's voice caught, and he had to pause to compose himself. Because he was hungry, and I couldn't feed him. The courtroom became noticeably quieter. Judge Caprio set down his papers and gave Marcus his full attention. Where are your parents, Marcus? My mom. She's not well, Your Honor. She tries, but she's sick, and sometimes she can't take care of us the way she should. My dad's not in the picture. It's just me and Danny. Judge Caprio studied the young man before him, recognizing something profound in his honesty. How long have you been taking care of your brother? About 2 years, really, but it got worse these past few months. Are you still in school? Yes, sir. I'm a junior at Central Falls High. I have a 3.8 GPA. Marcus said this without pride, simply as a fact. Judge Caprio turned to the public defender. Ms. Walsh, what does your client's record look like? Clean, Your Honor. No prior arrests, no disciplinary issues at school. His teachers describe him as responsible and mature, beyond his years. And what's the current situation with the younger brother? Marcus answered before his attorney could respond. Danny's with Mrs. Patterson right now. Social Services is investigating. I need to prove I can take care of him properly. I know I messed up, but I can't let them separate us. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture those familiar with his courtroom recognized as a sign that he was wrestling with something significant. Marcus, I want you to understand something. What you did was wrong. Taking something that doesn't belong to you, regardless of the reason, is theft. Do you understand that? Yes, sir, absolutely. But I also want you to understand something else. What you've been doing for your brother, trying to keep your family together, maintaining your grades while shouldering adult responsibilities, putting his needs before your own. That takes a kind of courage and character that most adults never develop. Marcus blinked rapidly, clearly fighting back tears. Judge Caprio continued. The law says I should impose a fine, community service, maybe probation. The law says I should treat this like any other shoplifting case, but sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. The entire courtroom held its breath. Judge Caprio stood up from his bench, something that rarely happened during routine hearings. Marcus, I'm going to do something unusual here. I'm dismissing the charges against you completely. Marcus's knees nearly buckled with relief, but Judge Caprio wasn't finished. But I'm dismissing them on one condition. I want you to accept help. Sir? Judge Caprio looked toward the back of the courtroom. Mrs. Rodriguez, are you here? Detective Rodriguez, who had arrested Marcus 2 weeks earlier, stood up from the gallery. Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Rodriguez, you mentioned in your report that you were concerned about this family situation. Are you still willing to help connect them with appropriate resources? Absolutely, Your Honor. Judge Caprio turned back to Marcus. Here's what's going to happen. Detective Rodriguez is going to help you navigate the social services system properly. Not to take Danny away from you, but to get you both the support you need. Food assistance, counseling for your mother, maybe even help with college applications when the time comes. Marcus was crying now, not caring who saw. Your Honor, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, but I do need you to promise me something. Promise me that you'll never let pride stop you from asking for help again. What you did today, trying to feed your brother, that wasn't wrong because you cared. It was wrong because you tried to handle an impossible situation all by yourself. I promise, Marcus whispered. But Judge Caprio still wasn't done. He reached into his wallet and pulled out several bills, handing them to the court clerk. Mrs. Henderson, please give this to Mr. Thompson, and I want you to call Central Falls Market and speak with the manager. Tell them I'm personally covering the cost of the items that were taken, plus a little extra for their trouble. The amount was $100, enough to buy groceries for Marcus and Danny for at least 2 weeks. Marcus was shaking now, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Your Honor, why are you doing this? Judge Caprio looked at him with the kind of warmth that had made him beloved by millions of people around the world. Because 25 years ago, I was a young prosecutor who made a lot of mistakes, and I learned something important. Sometimes the best way to uphold the law is to remember that behind every case is a human being who deserves compassion and a second chance. He paused, looking around the courtroom at the faces of everyone who had witnessed this exchange. But mostly, Marcus, I'm doing this because what you've been doing for your brother is what love looks like. And I think the world needs more people who understand that kind of love. As Marcus prepared to leave the courtroom, something remarkable happened. The other defendants who had been waiting for their cases began standing up one by one until everyone in the gallery was on their feet applauding. It wasn't loud or disruptive. It was a quiet, sustained acknowledgement of something beautiful they had all witnessed. Judge Caprio called for order, but he was smiling as he did so. Even he seemed moved by the response from people who had come expecting routine legal proceedings, but instead had experienced something transformative. Detective Rodriguez met Marcus outside the courtroom, and true to Judge Caprio's arrangement, she became not his arresting officer, but his advocate, helping him navigate systems he had been too proud and too scared to approach on his own. Within a month, Marcus and Danny were receiving proper food assistance. Their mother was enrolled in a rehabilitation program that offered hope for real recovery, and Mrs. Patterson had been officially approved as a temporary guardian who could provide stability while keeping the brothers together. The story of Marcus Thompson's day in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom spread throughout Providence and beyond, but not because of media attention. It spread the way the best stories do, through people telling other people about something extraordinary they had witnessed. Central Falls Market, upon learning the full story, not only dropped any remaining concerns about the shoplifting incident, but offered Marcus a part-time job with flexible hours that worked around his school schedule. The manager, Linda Chen, said she had never seen a case where a crime revealed such character, and she wanted to be part of his solution rather than his problem. Marcus's grades remained strong, and with Detective Rodriguez's help, he began applying for college scholarships and programs designed for students who had overcome significant hardships. His essay for one application began with a simple sentence: "I learned about justice the day I thought my life was over." Danny thrived with the stability that proper nutrition and support provided. His teacher reported that the quiet, withdrawn boy had transformed into an engaged student who spoke proudly of his big brother who takes care of everyone. Perhaps most remarkably, Linda Thompson completed her rehabilitation program 6 months later and began the difficult work of rebuilding her relationship with her sons. The family's healing process was complicated and ongoing, but it was happening within a framework of support rather than secrecy and shame. Judge Frank Caprio continued to receive updates about the Thompson family through Detective Rodriguez, who had been so moved by the case that she began specializing in connecting troubled families with resources rather than simply processing their legal problems. 2 years later, Marcus graduated from high school as valedictorian and received a full scholarship to Providence College, where he planned to study social work. His graduation speech thanked many people, but he saved his longest acknowledgement for Judge Frank Caprio, who had taught him that justice and compassion weren't opposing forces but complementary ones. Danny, now 9 and thriving, attended his brother's graduation ceremony with their mother, who was approaching 2 years of sobriety and working as a counselor in the same program that had helped her recover. The story of what happened in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom that February day serves as a powerful reminder that our legal system works best when it recognizes that punishment and healing aren't always the same thing. Marcus Thompson's case demonstrates that sometimes the most important justice happens not when we follow the letter of the law, but when we remember that the law exists to serve humanity's highest aspirations. Judge Caprio's decision to see potential rather than just problems, to offer help rather than just consequences, created ripple effects that continue to influence how Providence handles cases involving young people in desperate circumstances. The $12.47 worth of groceries that Marcus stole became the foundation for a life rebuilt on principles of honesty, responsibility, and community support. And the 16-year-old who stood in handcuffs outside a grocery store, certain his life was over, discovered instead that sometimes our worst moments become the gateway to our best opportunities. Marcus Thompson never shoplifted again, not because he feared punishment, but because Judge Frank Caprio had shown him that there were people willing to help when help was needed. And that understanding, that we don't have to carry impossible burdens alone, became the foundation for everything good that followed in his and Danny's lives. The teenage shoplifter who appeared before Judge Frank Caprio that day left the courtroom as something else entirely. A young man who understood that accepting help wasn't failure, that community existed for people like him, and that justice, at its best, looked exactly like compassion in action.